As the world waits for the impact of the Omicron coronavirus variant against current vaccines, countries where vaccines are prevalent are losing patience with those who haven't gotten the jab. Germany, in the midst of a big COVID surge, has just announced it is banning unvaccinated people from all but the most essential businesses. They'll also face contact restrictions in private settings. In South Africa, where Omicron is fast becoming the dominant variant, the premier of the country's most populous province is urging people to get vaccinated immediately amid what he called a situation of great concern. And in the coming hours, US President Joe Biden will lay out his plans for those reluctant to get the shots ahead of a possible winter surge. Well, our reporters bringing you the very latest from Europe, from Africa and from Asia. Fred Pleitking connecting us today from Berlin. David McKenzie is in Johannesburg. Ivan Watson is in Hong Kong. And Fred, I do want to start with you this evening. Lay out what we know.
Well, Becky, I think one of the things that you've just said is exactly what the German government feels, and Angela Merkel and her designated successor said as well. They are losing patience with people who so far have refused or have not gotten vaccinated yet. And so therefore, the lockdown measures that were announced today, those tougher restrictions, they essentially count only for unvaccinated people. And one of the things that's being sort of talked about here in German media and in German society is that this is essentially a lockdown for the unvaccinated. Now, unvaccinated are essentially being locked out of all businesses except for the most essential ones, like, for instance, supermarkets and pharmacies as well. But you're also, for instance, talking about recreational indoor sports facilities, indoor clubs, and things of that nature as well. Also, on top of that, the Germans are saying that above a certain infection rate, things like discos and bars will also be shut down in the areas where those high infection rates exist. The German government is saying, this is Angela Merkel and her designated successor, we of course have a new incoming government here in the next couple of days. They are saying they want more people to get vaccinated. Also put forward a really ambitious plan as well, because one of the ways that they want to come to terms with this latest massive wave of infections is more vaccinations and more booster shots. And they say they want to administer up to 30 million shots, that's both boosters and first vaccinations, before the end of the year. And finally, Becky, and this is really something very important and certainly a big change in tone among German politicians, both Angela Merkel and her successor were saying that they are open and in favor of mandatory vaccinations. Now, of course, a touchy subject here in this country. They say they want the German government to draft a law. They want the ethics committee of the German parliament to then talk about it and give recommendations. And there could be a vote and mandatory vaccinations here in this country come February. So we're certainly seeing a big change in tone here in this country, and certainly a big, I wouldn't call it a crackdown, but certainly a lockdown, if you will, for unvaccinated people, Becky.
And let's remind ourselves, Germany already going through a very severe wave of COVID before this Omicron variant appeared, correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's one of the things that we've seen as well. It's not only a wave of massive coronavirus infections. In fact, I just checked the numbers for today. It's 73,000 new infections in the span of 24 hours, which is a little bit less than the same day of the past week, but certainly well above anything that you would have seen, for instance, at the same time of last year, where we were already going through a big wave of infections here in Germany. And one of the things that is really concerning for the authorities here, and certainly for the healthcare sector here, is that ICUs really are filling up as well. In fact, at the beginning of this week, I was in one ICU outside of Berlin. They only had one vacant ICU bed left, and the ICUs certainly are filling up, and there is a concern, despite the fact that this country has a very robust healthcare sector, that it could be overwhelmed if the trend continues, especially in the hardest hit areas here in this country. There are already military medical evacuations going on from certain places to make sure that there's still ICU capacities, Becky.